You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with Travis Reier on Tide 100.9 in Tuscaloosa. This is Southern Fried Sports with Bama Online senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Make it through this year, I think I'm gonna put this bottle down. I guess as time goes on, I'll grow to miss it less than I will now. And I think I'm gonna tell her that I'm gonna go away for a while, till I can get this demon out.
It is 11 a.m. on a Masters Thursday morning. It is time once again for Southern Fried Sports on your home for University of Alabama Athletics. Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. The show, as always, brought to you by Peterbrook Chocolatier out there at 1530 McFarland Boulevard, north in the Indian Hills section of Tuscaloosa. And it is that time of year. Time to start thinking ahead to the summer months. That's right. Time to do that. And if you've got that young person that you think might enjoy a chocolate camp, they can take care of that for you there at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 205-752-0211. Get that gal, that little guy, get them involved in a summer camp they'll never forget. The one right there at Peterbrook Chocolatier, 1530 McFarland Boulevard North. Joined on the program by the executive producer of Southern Fried Sports, Jacob Harrison, and together we combine to form the 60 of Sports Talk Radio. Jacob Harrison, how are you doing on this Thursday morning?
I'm doing pretty good. Getting a little confidence in my smoke screen with Justin Fields throwing again for the 49ers staff.
Oh, I was going to get into that. And as we talked about, even if that wasn't the case, Jacob, as we've tried to get across here, I think pretty adamantly, you got to stay with the smoke screen. I mean, because once you call the smoke screen, you got to be willing to die on that hill for that smoke screen. And I did see that. I did see where Justin Fields has organized a second pro day, and Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch are expected to be in attendance. So I knew that gave you a little juice. I knew that lifted you up just a little bit.
Made the air a little bit thicker up on this hill.
It's a little smokier for that smoke screen. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Going to be a lot of intrigue, you got to think, maybe heading up to that once you get past 2. I mean, we all anticipate, of course, Trevor Lawrence going to our Jacksonville Jaguars, number 1 overall, and then the Jets, they're going with Zach Wilson at number 2, and number 3, right, is kind of where this draft starts, as of right now anyway. We'll see how it goes. But Mac Jones, I see here, Jacob, we talked about Cleveland, Ohio hosting the 2021 NFL Draft, and I see where the first group of attendees who have accepted invites to be on hand for the draft coming up later in the month, spills over into the first day or 2 of May as well. Mac Jones, you're going to have Devontae Smith, Christian Barmore, and Patrick Surtain II. 4 Alabama players have accepted invites to be on hand for that draft. I guess of the 4, Jacob, do you have a little concern about Christian Barmore being green room guy, being at the draft? Because you see Christian in all these different mocks from anywhere from the first round to maybe into the 40s. That's probably my concern of the Alabama guys early on in looking at this accepted invitee list, is that Christian Barmore might end up sitting around for a little while.
I don't know. I think he's a first rounder. I think that a lot of what I've seen since he accepted his invite is a lot of people saying the NFL is higher on him than maybe
the mocks.
The mocks in the media. And who am I going to trust a little bit more? The NFL or the mock draft guys? The NFL got it completely different than the mock guys expected last year.
You know what I trust? I trust positional value, and that's where if I'm Christian Barmore, who do you think would have greater extended green room danger? Christian Barmore or Najee Harris? Speaking of positional value, who do you think, Jacob, would be most in danger of being in that unenviable position of just kind of Brady Quinn years ago, right? Even Aaron Rodgers sitting around waiting to have that name called.
Well, between the two, I would go Barmore. I think Najee probably has a home at 18, but he's not making it past 24. Okay. He's going to Pittsburgh if he's available, I think. Barmore can get anywhere between 20 and 32.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. But you do have that out there for you where the draft is concerned. And, you've got Alabama spring football practice. We got another scrimmage upon us at Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday afternoon. We'll have to see how the weather plays into all this in the next couple of days. You heard from Nick Saban post-practice following Wednesday's workout over there off Bryant Drive. We'll get into some of his post-practice comments. He was asked specifically about some guys, Jalen Moody, the senior inside linebacker among them. Sounds like Jalen Moody. We talk so much about Henry To'oTo'o and the possibility of To'oTo'o eventually being a part of the Alabama program pending next week's D1 Council rubber stamp. At least that's what it is expected to happen, where the one-time transfer rule is concerned, and then for the leagues to pretty much follow suit where the intra-conference transfer rules are concerned. But, it just sounds like Jalen Moody isn't ready to take a back seat to anyone. And you saw enough of him in 2020 when an emphasis on that Arkansas game last December where he was forced into action following the injury to Christian Harris looked really good. And so Moody appears to be coming into his own to go along with Christian Harris. The more the merrier, right? Look, if it works out that you add Henry To'oTo'o as well, great. But again, with Moody continuing to develop nicely under the tutelage of inside linebackers coach and defensive coordinator Pete Golding, who, by the way, was the primary recruiter on Jalen Moody, who was pretty much an afterthought. When you go back to the 2018 recruiting class and look at where Jalen Moody stacked up among Alabama signees in that group, he was third from the bottom in terms of the rankings. The two guys he was ahead of, Skylar DeLong, the punter, who has since left the program, had his struggles, as we know, trying to fill that big right shoe of J.K. Scott. No one was going to do that, but it seemed especially tough for Skylar DeLong. And then Lane Hatcher, late at the quarterback position. That's the two guys that Jalen Moody, in terms of the rankings, the 24/7 Sports composite rankings, was listed ahead of. And, he's seen action in each of his 3 years, been mostly special teams, more at linebacker a year ago, seemed to kind of separate himself from the pack, at least where weak side linebacker was concerned. We'll see from a depth perspective, Alabama in a great spot at inside linebacker because Shane Lee's a guy that played a ton 2 years ago. He can step in there at the Mike linebacker position if you need him to. Jalen Moody can probably play both inside and weak side, or middle and weak side. So you got some good options there. And Jalen Moody appears to be at the forefront of those to go along with Christian Harris. 205-342-9904. That is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. If you would like to jump on board with us, we'd love to hear from you. Speaking of the draft, we are going to talk with my neighbor and good pal, Chase Goodbread of NFL.com, coming up in the very next segment. If you haven't, you need to go read Chase's long-form piece on Mac Jones. It dropped yesterday over at NFL.com. Now, look, if you cover Alabama, you're a hardcore Alabama fan, there is some things that you're already readily aware of, kind of that relationship that Mac had during his time at Alabama with Nick Saban and the McEnroe references and trying to manage his emotions, but there's some really good nuggets in there as well that Chase was able to unearth, including one in which that win over Michigan in the Citrus Bowl on New Year's Day, 2020, Mac took a big shot after the play. It was actually ruled as a late hit and flagged as a late hit on Mac Jones. And it was such a shot that Mac Jones apparently had one of his molars split into pieces, according to Chase's reporting. According to Mac Hereford, former Alabama wide receiver that Chase talked to for the piece, and split Mac Jones' molar into pieces. He goes over to the bench. He's spitting up blood and chunks of a tooth. And the hit came with such force that the bowl patch that Alabama had on his jerseys, Mac Jones's was split in half, torn in half by the hit from Aiden Hutchinson, the Michigan defensive end. And apparently Mac just took what was left of it and ripped it off and threw it down. And Jeff Allen and the training staff attempted to tend to Mac Jones and come out on the field, and Mac's yelling at him to stay off the field, and he didn't miss a play. And you talk about some moments that solidify yourself as the guy, the dude. Yeah, I'd say that was one of them for Mac Jones. But we'll talk with Chase about Mac Jones. We're also going to ask Chase for his thoughts on this Devontae Smith deal, as it's become known here on Southern Fried Sports. The Devontae Smith deal, Jacob Harrison. Because, again, we talk about Christian Barmore and how he's perceived maybe by the mock industry and how perhaps the clubs themselves actually view him. And you wonder the same thing about Devontae Smith at this point, right? I mean, when you look at mocks here of late, the trend for Devontae Smith is to be moving down boards, whether it's Daniel Jeremiah, whether it's pick a mockster. You can pick them. But I'm going to ask Chase. We'll ask Chase, what's the vibe maybe within the league, with clubs, with decision makers? What's real, I guess, is what we're going to ask with Devontae Smith. Also, from the Alabama Athletic Department last night, you had the Alabama baseball team dropping a 5-3 decision to La Monroe. ULM came in here. Remember, the Tuesday game was canceled, so it was just a single game yesterday, and Alabama in a bit of a malaise right now on the baseball diamond. It's on to Texas A&M for the weekend. Alabama very much in need of a series win at 2-7 in SEC play. So just seems like when it's not hitting, this team doesn't pitch exceptionally well. And then when it seems to pitch well enough, especially against a midweek opponent, it can't score enough. Just having a tough time right now, Alabama baseball, sort of bringing it all together. We'll see how it goes starting out at Texas A&M coming up over the weekend as well. 205-342-9904. Of course, it is Masters Thursday. We love it. We love it. We love the pro golf on the cable here on the program. And from the Alabama perspective, you got Michael Thompson. Michael Thompson went out in the very first twosome of the day. You had the ceremonial tee shots by Jack Nicklaus, of course. You also had Gary Player, the Black Knight, alongside Jack. Of course, you used to have Arnold Palmer before he passed away, as kind of completing that trio here in the modern era. But it was also special this morning because, as we talked about on the show yesterday, Lee Elder, the first African-American to participate in the Masters tournament, he joined Jack Nicklaus and Gary Player there on the first tee versus. And then right after that, Michael Thompson went off in his twosome. And Michael had a little bit of an up-and-down morning, but when it was all said and done, and given the scores that we're seeing now, Hideki Matsuyama is balling right now. He just eagled number 8, and so he is 3 under through 8. But for the most part, rather tame the scoring. So Michael Thompson he's 2 over. He was 2 over through 12. But then he eagles the par 5 13th. That's where you got to make your money there on the back nine, on those 2 par 5s, 13 and 15. And then he birdied the par 5 15th. So he was 3 under through 3 under through 3 holes there from 13 to 15. And that got him into red figures from 2 over to 1 under. He bogeyed 17, parred 18. He gets in at even par 72. You'll take that, so far at least, because, again, it doesn't look like Augusta National is just being shredded by this early wave on the opening day of the 2021 Masters. You're going to have Justin Thomas, Alabama alum of some note, as we know, going off at 12:48 Central. So he'll be in your afternoon television window, as they like to say. JT will be. I'm told that maybe Polo has tried to come back to Justin Thomas on multiple occasions now and sort of reconnect that relationship. Justin had the remarks out in, I guess it was Hawaii, that cost him the sponsorship he had, the apparel deal he had with Polo. But I'm told anyway, industry source, I'm being told by, that Polo has since come back to Justin on multiple occasions to maybe try to mend that, again, reconnect, pick back up with that relationship. And from what I'm told, Justin has told Polo he's moving on, not interested. Also out there at Augusta National Golf Club, in addition to Matsuyama at 3 under, Kevin Kisner, former Georgia Bulldog. That's a home game for Kevin Kisner. I mean, he lives right down the street from Augusta National Golf Club. Kevin Kisner is 2 under through 10, so we'll keep you up to date on the scoring throughout the program from Augusta National Golf Club today as well. Going to step aside, though, for our first break. When we come back, Chase Goodbread, NFL.com. We'll talk about that long-form piece. Bit of an advantage for Chase Goodbread, by the way, on that long form with Mac Jones, because he, like Mac Jones and myself, Jacksonville, Florida natives. So Chase, more so than anyone that's done these type of things involving Mac, has a really good feel for Mac's background, kind of where he comes from. Definitely understands where Mac came from a high school perspective, like myself. Chase, former preps writer down there at the Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville, covered the Bolles School extensively for years, and more specifically, former and late Bolles head coach Corky Rogers. So, as we've talked about, and when we had Mac on this program after he committed to Alabama years ago, making that adjustment from the demands that he was going to encounter from a coach like Nick Saban, he had already experienced that with Charles Buxton Corky Rogers IV down there at the Bolles School. We'll talk with Chase when Southern Fried Sports returns on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.
From the University of Alabama, this is Crimson Tide Today. It's a daily update on Bama sports, and it's brought to you by SunSouth John Deere, the preferred tractor equipment for Alabama athletics. Visit sunsouth.com or any of their 21 locations across the Southeast. Hello again, everybody. I'm Roger Hoover. Alabama's Luisa Blanco was voted the Women's Collegiate Gymnastics Association Region 1 Gymnast of the Year by the Coaches Association, announced on Tuesday. Blanco discusses what's led to her success this season.
I think it's just the consistency in the gym. We talk about numbers and hitting your average, and ultimately we've done a really good job in preparation. So it feels really good to have all that hard work pay off at the meet. So going up on whatever apparatus, bars, beam, vault, or floor, and thinking this is a national championship routine, and you build and you build and you build and you get that confidence that you try to have at the meets. So that's probably the biggest key.
I'll have more in a moment.
Have you priced a new John Deere tractor lately? SunSouth John Deere has a full line of affordable lawn and tractor equipment this season. SunSouth John Deere has an affordable roster for everyone, from riding mowers to utility vehicles and lots of tractors. Stop by any of the 21 locations across Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, or visit sunsouth.com to find out what is right for you. Any budget, any project, SunSouth has you covered. Proud to be the preferred tractor equipment dealer of the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Join us Thursday afternoon for Crimson Drive on the CTSN Facebook page. Streaming live at 2 p.m. Central. We'll have conversations with Alabama men's basketball assistant coach Brian Hodgson, plus SEC Gymnast of the Year Luisa Blanco, and Director of Athletics Greg Byrne. That's Crimson Drive this afternoon at 2 p.m. Central on the CTSN Facebook page. And that's your Bama Update. Crimson Tide Today brought to you by SunSouth John Deere. Crimson Tide Today is a production of the Crimson Tide Sports.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A very warm afternoon. The sky partially sunny, the high 84. Tonight becoming cloudy, a chance of developing showers, maybe a thunderstorm in spots, the low 62. Tomorrow cloudy at times, a few passing showers and strong storms with a high at 79. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 73 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Tide 100.9. For more coverage of Alabama football, visit us at Tide100.9.com. Or download the free Tide 100.9 app.
The Crimson Tide will not be denied.
Back with more of a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, with you each and every weekday morning from 11 a.m. until noon. A little Ben Folds 5 and get you going, get you headed in the right direction as the weekend approaches. We're going to head to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line right now and check in with our good pal and good neighbor, Chase Goodbread. Busy individual this time of year. Busy all year, but specifically with the draft looming here in the next couple of weeks. Chase Goodbread, as we talked about in the opening segment of today's program, dropped an absolute beauty at NFL.com on Wednesday. A long-form deep dive into Mac Jones, the Alabama quarterback, destined for what appears to be, perhaps anyway, Jacob Harrison says it's all a smokescreen. We'll ask Chase about that too. Maybe the number 3 overall pick by the San Francisco 49ers. Chase with an outstanding profile of Mac. And Chase, I got to say though, and I said this at the end of the first segment, home field advantage for you in that one, my friend. You know that lay of the land where Mac comes from.
I do. It was kind of funny. Kind of pursuing that story and talking to some people that around him that he knows, has played for, his family, et cetera, and kind of letting them know, yeah, I've been around, grew up in Jacksonville, covered high school football, knew Bowles, knew Corky Rogers, and knew the Alabama program pretty well too from having covered it. So Mac was a long way behind me on those trails, but I was at least somewhat familiar with him.
Yeah, Goodbread back in the day, he widened those trails, I would say, even, Chase Goodbread back in the day. But it was is a great read, as we talked about. We touched on the portion about the fractured molar and the win over Michigan and the Citrus Bowl, and I guess if there was a shame in all of it, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way, I know you would have loved to have talked to his former high school coach, Corky Rogers, in depth about, their relationship back in his high school days. And of course, unfortunately, Corky passed away here in the last year and a half or so.
He would have been one of my first calls. There's no doubt about it. And it would have been good to catch up to him too, because I hadn't talked to him at all since I moved from Jacksonville to Tuscaloosa in 2007. But yeah, I was able to track down a couple of assistants anyway. Wayne Belger, who of course was a long time assistant for Corky Rogers. He is now retired. I was catching up with him. He was spending some time in North Carolina when I got a hold of him. And Kevin Fagan was the quarterback coach at the time. And my understanding, Travis, was that Kevin Fagan was a, quote, necessary buffer between Corky and Mac.
I could see Fagan being that. In fact, I've known Kevin Fagan so long growing up on the west side of Jacksonville like we both did. He was a Normandy guy. I was a Lake Shore guy. I've known Kevin long enough to know that his nickname growing up was Booger. So, you know, that's a little depth there with Kevin. But no doubt, and I think, you know, you covered my younger brother at Bowles. I think the relationship between him and Corky, and a lot of these quarterbacks in general, and the late Corky Rogers is probably pretty similar. In other words, I see that you gathered from Mac, and maybe this had something to do with him being seemingly totally comfortable with his place and things as soon as he got at Alabama, was that he had, if he had dealt and excelled and held up under Corky Rogers, it probably wasn't going to be that huge of an adjustment for him going to even a place like Alabama and Nick Saban.
No, and sometimes when you go down that route, you get shrugs from people, which I guess is understandable because millions of people know who Nick Saban is, and Corky Rogers was a local coach, but people kind of snicker at that a little bit and say, "Oh, no high school coach could be as rough on a guy as Nick Saban." Well, yeah, they could. And
yeah, I can tell you that. Yes.
So, yeah, and really one thing I was able to kind of ascertain is that the relationship between Corky and Mac in high school took a turn after his junior year, and I think their relationship and the trust level really grew a great deal Mac's senior year, which turned out to be Rogers' last year as a coach. And not unlike the relationship with Saban took a turn a little bit toward the end. Now, I think Nick Saban had some pretty good trust in Mac Jones by 2019, which would have been his junior year. But the point being that eventually Mac Jones turned both of those guys into fans of his.
You also got into in the piece the situation Mac had off the field early on in his time at Alabama. He was charged with a DUI, and you know, from what it reads like and what you were able to gather, if there was kind of a recentering, I guess you could say, of Mac Jones at that point, that situation, that mistake had a lot to do with it, it sounds like.
It was a turning point for him too. I think he started to take things a little bit more seriously, and you know, this didn't make the story, but from what I'm told, that he knocked out his community service hours at a local soup kitchen in Tuscaloosa really quickly. You know, like within 2 or 3 weeks, he was done. But the soup kitchen experience made enough of an impact on him that he kept going back. So. You know, that's certainly impressive. Obviously, you would think a lot of guys, you know, would bolt, you know, as soon as the bell rang when it comes to state mandated community service. But Jones knows the people over there at that soup kitchen pretty well, and from what I understand, still stays in touch with one or two of them.
You dive right into the piece, and if you haven't seen it already, you need to check it out. Jokes on You, featuring Mac Jones, authored by Chase Goodbread. Again, you can find it right now at NFL.com. You go right into sort of the origination of the Joker moniker that Mac Jones took on, and went into depth with one of his former teammates, Richie Pettibone, who was an offensive lineman at Alabama before transferring to Illinois. And I guess a lot of that has to do with Mac's demeanor and things like that, but also just a guy, it sounds like anyway, Chase, that unusual in that even before he was Mac Jones, a guy that seemed just beloved by his teammates in general. And so you talk about the intangibles of how many times we heard Nick Saban say it, winning the team. It sounded like by the time Mac got his opportunity, he had already done that.
Yeah, the players loved him. There's no doubt, and of course the scout team loved him first, and the first team defense didn't love him for a while. I've talked to Keith Holcomb as well for the story, and he said Mac would take a bump even in the black jersey every once in a while when he would annoy that first string defense when he was on the scout team. But yeah, he had certainly won the team and won the locker room by 2019. I think there was a lot of confidence in him the minute Tua Tagovailoa got hurt. It didn't take his play after that point for the team to be sold on him. And you know, of course, that Auburn loss at the end of that season was one that stuck with him. There were a couple of interceptions, of course, that went back for touchdowns. But you know, as was noted in the story, he put him back on top on the scoreboard after both of those pick sixes. And, you know, his teammates, I don't think, wavered at all in their confidence in him after that.
You know, it seems like the practice stories involving Mac Jones and Nick Saban are just going to grow in legend as the years go by. It's already happening. I know in your long form here, there is at least one other that you talked about and some things that Mac would do in practice that as a scout team quarterback, you know, if you're told to throw an interception even, you throw the interception, right? And Mac didn't seem okay with that, I guess we could say, perhaps to the extent where I'm sure Nick Saban appreciated Mac's unwillingness to just give it up, so to speak. But when you're the scout team quarterback, sometimes that's what you're asked to do. But Mac kind of flew in the face of that, it sounds like.
Yeah, in Nick Saban's eyes, a scout team quarterback throwing the ball out of bounds to throw it away is basically aborting the rep, right? So, yeah, he wants a live rep for those DBs, and he's not too worried about whether that ball is going to be completed or not. So, certainly, Mac didn't see it that way, and he would chuck it off that Mal Moore bed. Supposedly, he would not only throw it out of bounds, but just throw it. He'd throw it so whoever had to chase it had to run as far as he would have to run. And, you know, possibly make that guy run. He made him ran after those balls. So, yeah, that I can see that getting old for Nick Saban. And the hard counts, Trav. He hard counted that first.
Draw that first team defense offside.
Yeah.
You know, Nick didn't like that so good in 2018, but he liked it real good in 2020, you know, when Mac was actually in there. I think he appreciated it more this past season than he did a couple of years ago when Mac was engineering that offense. Mac, not the scout team quarterback to give your defense a look that you might want it sometimes, I guess is a way of saying it too. Give you a good look in terms of his competitiveness and his accuracy, but not just going to roll over for anybody, Mac Jones. Hey, Chase, as we look ahead to the end of the month, and our own Jacob Harrison here, executive producer of Southern Fried Sports, he's convinced the 49ers and Mac at 3 is a smokescreen. It won't be Mac Jones for the 49ers. How do you kind of envision, you know, these events, what's come up here in the last week or two with Mac and the 49ers?
Well, here's what I'll tell you. He may be right. It may be a smokescreen, but it ain't a smokescreen that they're moving up to take a quarterback. And I can tell you this, San Francisco moving up, whether they pick Mac Jones or not, probably puts money in Mac Jones' pocket, right? Because if they take somebody else, if they take a Trey Lance, if it goes Lawrence and Wilson 1-2 and the Niners take Lance or they take Fields, all that does is move Mac Jones up one spot for the next team that needs one. So it could get him drafted faster by the Niners moving up. So yeah, the Falcons, they might be ready to move on from Matt Ryan or at least get somebody in place behind Matt Ryan so they could turn around and take a quarterback. So it's these quarterbacks are going to go, they always go fast, but they might go faster than ever in this draft.
Yeah, you got Daniel Jeremiah, I guess, in his most recent mock, had 5 in the top 7 or 8. And, yeah, if 3 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, and the Falcons are sitting there at 4, even if they don't want to take a quarterback, it's going to increase the sense of urgency that for another club that does. and they may get a nice bounty to move out of 4, so somebody else can come up there and take one of those couple of remaining quarterbacks. What about Devontae Smith while we're talking about narratives and sort of perception, and a guy that seems to be more far-ranging in terms of where he might ultimately go, when he might ultimately go in this draft? Jamar Chase, obviously, some recency bias, and also the guy's a hell of a prospect, by the way. But what he was able to do at LSU Pro Day recently certainly helped him, you would think. What's real, in your opinion, or what you've been able to gather with Devontae Smith right now?
I think he's gone in the top half of the first round. I think that's pretty safe. It gets a little dicey if you try to start predicting him, top 5 or somewhere right behind that area. He could go top 10 easily. I think if he doesn't go top 10, though, it's not going to take long. It's not unlike the quarterback situation, right, where they're just going to go bang, bang, bang right out of the gate. It could go quarterback, 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 receiver, 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 right at the top, because you got Kyle Pitts, who the NFL looks at as a receiver, and a great one.
Yeah.
You've got Jamar Chase, as you mentioned. You got Jalen Waddle from Alabama. You got Devontae Smith. Hard to say where Smith is going to fall in there. It seems like Pitts and Chase are regarded by most teams, I think, a little bit ahead of Devontae Smith. So I'd be a little surprised if he went in front of those two guys. But again, if out of the top 10 picks of the draft, you might see 7 of them either be a quarterback or a receiver. So,
wow.
And maybe 8. Who knows? So those, the battery, as they call it in baseball, Travis, it's gonna be flying off the board pretty fast.
In this era of football, man, it's amazing to see what the value of the receiver position has done. I mean, it's always been important, but I said this a few years ago. If it were up to me these days with how the game is played and how it is also officiated so much in favor of the offensive side of the ball, if you give me the choice of, say, a Jamar Chase or a Patrick Surtain II at corner right now, with the way the game is played, Chase, don't you almost have to go wide receiver if it comes down to it?
I think I hear what you're saying, that if you, with the way it's officiated and the way these quarterbacks are so good now with these back shoulder throws and threading these needles, I hear you.
You can't play corner anymore. You can't really play corner in the NFL with the 5-yard penalty and all the things that are working against you. It's tough, man.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The flip side, though, to that argument, of course, is that cornerbacks are often in short supply in the NFL draft, even at the top, and wide receivers are usually in heavy supply. And so from if you look at it from a supply demand type of perspective, you better get somebody that can do something with these guys right at the cornerback position. And it's tough, but the drop off from the top 5 wide receivers in this draft to the second best 5 isn't going to be anything like the drop off from the top 5 corners to the next 5. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. You got some guys from this Alabama perspective in this draft. It's, again, Devontae does seem safe for the first half of the first round, like you're saying. But, I see where you guys updated yesterday the Alabama invitees that have accepted those invites for, the draft, and Cleveland coming up. And we talked about it earlier in the program, a guy that you worry about in terms of being, green room guy for 2021 is Christian Barmore. And, Jacob had a good point about, it may be that the clubs view Christian Barmore differently than maybe some of the mocks you see Christian Barmore down in the 40s overall. But then, the positional value that comes into play with him, I guess, Chase, and, what that position looks like for this crop, I guess, could push him up.
A lot of positional value for sure, and a bad year for defensive tackles in the draft, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I if you think back to, there was a year, and I want to say, I'm a little fuzzy, I want to say it was 2016, where the defensive tackle crop was just insane. I mean, there were top 100 caliber defensive tackles all over the place, and it pushed A'Shawn Robinson and Jaron Reed into second-round picks. A'Shawn Robinson and Jaron Reed would both be first-round picks in this draft. That's, in my opinion, that's how light I think it looks at that position, which certainly could help Christian Barmore. But yeah, like you said, it's tough to sit in that green room on the back end, Travis. Usually they only bring one suit to the draft, Travis, instead of two, because
Landon Collins, yeah, right? 2015 had that one suit.
One suit and gone. They don't like to stick around and hang around that green room on the second day. They're usually gone with a little bit of disappointment, unfortunately, if they don't go in the first round. But you admire and respect certainly the guys that do hang around and soak it up after being a second-round pick, because there's nothing wrong with that either.
No, worked out okay for Landon. He got to that second deal quicker, that's for sure.
That's right.
With the 4 years instead of the 5. So, and Landon did come back, right, that second day in that same suit, and was, I think, the first guy off the board in the second round.
I think they traded up for him, as a matter of fact, the Giants.
The Giants, yeah, you're right. Hey, Chase, man, appreciate the time. Absolutely great stuff with Mac Jones. And, of course, Chase does great work at NFL.com. We do our podcast together, Talking Tide, which you can find anywhere you consume podcasts. And Crimson Cover, outstanding television here in Tuscaloosa and beyond. You can find that outstanding program with Chase, the mayor, Mike Parker, and, of course, John Copeland, legendary Alabama football player. Thanks, Chase.
All right, Travis. See you, man.
There he goes, Chase Goodbread, outstanding long-form author more recently here on Mac Jones. Again, get to NFL.com. Check out that piece today. Going to head to a break. When we come back, more of a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM right after this.
You're listening to Southern Fried Sports with BamaOnline.com senior analyst Travis Reier on your home for Alabama sports. Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Tide 100.9 FM. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com with you. Weekdays from 11 a.m. until noon. Got a few red numbers over there at Augusta National Golf Club as we get the opening round of the 2021 Masters Tournament into full swing. Hideki Matsuyama, 3 under through 10. Webb Simpson on a little bit of a heater here as he closes out his opening 9. Birdies at 7 and 8. He's now at 2 under. Henrik Stenson with that bomber 3-wood. He's 1 under through 15. So John Rahm now out on the golf course. He's 1 under through 7. New proud popper, John Rahm. Patrick Reed, he of the Preferred Lies, Patrick Reed, 1 under through 6. So you've got red numbers over there in the opening round, but nothing staggering as of yet. Matsuyama at 3 under through 10. He's building on potentially something special to get this 2021 Masters underway. 205-342-9904 is the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line. Thanks again to Chase Goodbread of NFL.com, Crimson Cover Television. Of course, the Talkin' Tide podcast with yours truly as well. What about it, Jacob Harrison? I asked him about your 49ers smokescreen, and he didn't exactly throw a water. You know, he didn't exactly extinguish that thought. of a smokescreen. I mean, he did say what we both felt all along, and certainly would seem somewhat obvious. If the Niners are going up to 3, it's for a quarterback. Just kind of remains to be seen which exactly of those quarterbacks the 49ers will end up with. So Jacob Harrison's smokescreen, I would say, is holding up pretty well to this point. Jacob, I think as a sort of a arbitrator in all this, okay, I see enough evidence to proceed is what I'm saying. I'm not going to dismiss your smokescreen theory at this point. I've got on my robe right now, and I've got my gavel, my trusty gavel. And my ruling as of right now is that we will proceed, Jacob, with the smokescreen theory.
Well, Chase didn't say a lot different than what I've been speculating on my show. You know, that this does nothing but help Mac Jones. But it doesn't matter to the 49ers whether it helps Mac Jones or not. The 49ers just need to feel comfortable that they're going to get what they're going to get. And remember, it doesn't always have to make sense, because remember last year when the Dolphins were throwing out smoke screens that they were going to trade up and go get a tackle when they never even made a phone call. Like, it was Tua the whole time, and everybody knew it was Tua the whole time. So it was just a smoke screen for the sake of it, just to keep everyone on their toes. And I feel like San Francisco's the same way. They're definitely going to draft a quarterback. They've been openly honest about that. But they haven't insinuated really one way or the other that it's Mac Jones, just because of the past quarterbacks that Shanahan's been around. And Shanahan already has the relationship with Justin Fields. It seemed too perfect to just immediately say, oh, it's for Mac. It's not working that way.
We're going to step aside for a final break and just let the smoke. We're going to let the smoke just sort of encompass you with that. And when we come back, we're going to put a wrap on a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports. Nick Saban, pretty interesting comments when asked about third-year safety Jordan Battle following yesterday's practice. You want an example of Nick Saban coaching people up through the media? Yeah, I think that was an example of that. We'll talk about that as we wrap up a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports right after this.
It begins. Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A very warm afternoon. The sky partially sunny, the high 84. Tonight becoming cloudy, a chance of developing showers, maybe a thunderstorm in spots, the low 62. Tomorrow cloudy at times, a few passing showers and strong storms with a high at 79. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 75 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
The flagship station for Alabama Crimson Tide football.
Alabama touchdown.
Only on Tide 100.9 and streaming on the Tide 100.9 app.
Cool in school. I'm sure you don't remember me. And now it's been 10 years. I'm still wondering who to be. And I'd love to mix in circles, clicks, and social coteries. That's me. Hand me my nose ring. Can we be happy? Show me the mosh pit. Can we be happy? We can be happy underground.
With a final segment of a Thursday rendition of Southern Fried Sports right here on Tide 100.9 FM. We touched on this heading out of the previous break. Nick Saban addressing the media following Wednesday's practice. The Crimson Tide, of course, prepping for Saturday's scrimmage, the second of spring drills for UA. And Nick was asked about Jordan Battle, the third-year safety starter 2020 on that national championship team. More so in relation to Battle emerging as one of those defensive leaders. And Nick Saban's response, I thought, was pretty interesting. Saban said Jordan Battle does a good job. He plays a lot of good football, but it's kind of up to him as to how he wants to accept the role of leadership, how assertive he wants to be. People have to earn the right to be leaders. They have to do things right themselves. They can't be late for meetings. They can't do things They can't not do things exactly right. They have to set a good example for others, and they have to care enough about other people to help them for their benefit. So that's his choice. And that's a lot of players' choice on the team. Do they want to take that responsibility of being a leader? He has done that at times, and I think he would be very good if he chose to do it. Wow. How about that? I'd say the ball is in Jordan Battle's court when it comes to exhibiting the kind of consistency Nick Saban would like to see from an area of the defense where you most certainly have to have an assertive voice. And he's also right. Jordan Battle's played a lot of good football for Alabama. And assuming he takes that next step where being that definitive voice on the back end is concerned, it's going to be even better. But I get asked about context and the why and how things come across at a Nick Saban press conference. Well, you just, with that comment, you just got to see Nick Saban coaching one of his players. If you wonder what Nick Saban says to a guy like Jordan Battle when it's just him and Battle in his office, well, that's probably a good example of it right there. That's going to do it for a Thursday edition of Southern Fried Sports. Lunch whistle on this Thursday. How about some Heat Pizza Bar? It's ladies' night down there at Government Plaza, downtown Tuscaloosa tonight. Heat Pizza Bar. Great, great pizza. Nightly specials. All-day happy hour on Sunday. No better pizza around than Heat Pizza Bar, downtown Tuscaloosa at Government Plaza. Until 11 a.m. on Friday. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.
Everything's heavy underground. We can't be happy, we can't be happy, we can't be happy underground.